My husband looked me dead in the eyes and said, "I want the house, the cars, the restaurant, everything." No tremble in his voice, no apology, nothing, not even the courtesy of a sigh. He said it like he was reading from a script someone else had written, like 14 years of marriage and 2 kids had been reduced to an inventory list. The room we were sitting in had no warmth in it, just a long fake wood table, a pitcher of water no one touched, and fluorescent lights that buzzed softly overhead like a warning you couldn't turn off. The walls were painted a beige that tried to look neutral and ended up looking tired. Even the air felt processed, recycled through vents that never quite cleaned out the stress. I noticed small things because small things are safer than the big truth. Monique's legal pads stacked with military precision, Quentin's watch catching the light every time he lifted his hand, Desmond's wedding band missing, his ring finger pale where it used to sit, as if he'd erased the last 14 years with one simple habit, taking it off. I still wore mine. Not because I believed in him anymore, but because I believed in time, in history, in the weight of promises, even when the person you made them to turns them into a joke. I'd put that ring on in a little church in Prince George's County, Grandma Laverne squeezing my hand so tight I could feel her faith pressing into my skin. Desmond had looked at me that day like I was his whole future. Now he looked at me like I was standing between him and a payout. Quentin cleared his throat and slid a packet across the table. "We've outlined a proposed division," he said, voice smooth. "The marital residence, the vehicles, and the business interest. My client believes a clean split is best. He'll assume the assets, and Mrs. Jackson can assume the liabilities that remain." He said liabilities like it was a fair trade. I flipped the top page with 2 fingers. There was my life in cold print. Mortgage numbers, vehicle notes, a line item labeled business valuation with a number that made my jaw tighten. They didn't know the real value of what they were trying to take. Not just the money, though, the money mattered, but the name on the sign, the smell of onions hitting hot oil at 6 in the morning, the way neighbors leaned on our counter and told me their news like we were family. Jackson's Wharf Kitchen wasn't a business interest to me. It was my granddaddy's hands. It was my community's hunger. It was my children's future, if they ever wanted it. Desmond watched me read, his face calm, almost bored. That calm was the part that chilled me most, because it meant he'd rehearsed this. Somewhere, he'd practiced my destruction like a sales pitch. Somewhere, he'd decided I would be easier to take from than to love. And in that moment, I realized something else. This wasn't a divorce conversation. This was a robbery with paperwork. Across the conference table, my attorney, Monique Harlan, didn't move at first. She'd been practicing family law in the D.C. metro area for almost 3 decades, long enough to recognize the kind of man who walks into a divorce negotiation already celebrating. Monique wore her suits tailored sharp, a quiet blade. When she finally reached for my hand, her fingers were cool and steady. "Slow down," she murmured, not to him, to me. "Don't react. Let him talk." Desmond Jackson sat on the other side of the table with his lawyer, Quentin Price. Quentin had that polished smile men use when they're about to ask for something they don't deserve. Desmond's posture was relaxed, as if he'd already won. "I'm entitled to it," Desmond continued. "I've invested years into this family. I've supported her. I'm not leaving with crumbs." My throat stayed still. No swallow, no shake. I listened to him and felt ice slide down my spine. He didn't see me as his wife. He saw me as a ledger. Monique kept her eyes on Quentin while she spoke in a calm tone that didn't give away the heat behind it. "Mr. Jackson, both D, C, and Maryland follow equitable distribution principles. Everything is not a legal term. We can discuss specific assets and responsibilities." Desmond's mouth tightened. He hated when anyone spoke to him like he wasn't the smartest person in the room. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, and held my gaze like he was trying to stare me back into my old role, the accommodating wife, the wife who smoothed things over. "You hear your lawyer?" he said, still looking at me. "She wants to argue, but I'm telling you what's going to happen. I'm keeping the house in Bowie. I'm keeping the Escalade. I'm keeping the restaurant, and you'll take the debt. That's fair." Fair. That word is dangerous, because people use it like it has God's signature on it. When Desmond said, "the restaurant," I heard the echo of my own voice from 1,000 ordinary days, calling orders, balancing drawers, reminding the cooks to label the sauces, laughing with customers who'd known me since I was a teenager. I also heard the night I'd found him on the back porch, phone glowing in his hand, and he'd snapped, "Stop acting like you own me." I had owned nothing but my hope. I glanced at the window behind Desmond. Outside, the day was early winter gray. Down on the street, traffic moved in slow lines, headlights pale. Life kept going like nothing in this room mattered. Monique squeezed my hand again. Her eyes flicked to mine for a split second, just long enough to ask without words, "Sierra, are we about to fight?" I leaned closer to her and lowered my voice until it was barely more than breath. "Give it to him," I said. Monique's pen stopped mid-stroke. The click in that quiet room sounded too loud. "What did you say?" she asked, still composed, but her eyebrows lifted, and for the first time since I'd hired her, I saw surprise. "You heard me," I said. "The house, the cars, the restaurant. Give him everything he's asking for." Quentin blinked. Desmond's face twitched, a tiny flicker of surprise he tried to swallow. He wasn't expecting surrender. Men like Desmond plan for noise. They don't plan for silence. Monique leaned in closer. "Sierra," she whispered, "we can negotiate. We can protect you. Please," I said softly, "trust me. Trust me." The words tasted strange, like something I'd worn for years and finally outgrew. Monique studied my face. She wasn't looking for tears. She was looking for instability. What she found instead was stillness. She cleared her throat and sat back. "In that case," she said, turning to Quentin, "we can draft terms reflecting your client's request. Full transfer of interest, title, and operational control." Quentin's smile stretched wider. "Now we're talking." Desmond didn't smile. Not fully. His eyes narrowed in suspicion, because some part of him remembered who I was before I married him. But greed is louder than memory, and it pressed its hands over his doubts. "Good," he said. "Finally." We wrapped up faster than I expected. Quentin dictated conditions. Monique wrote them down with a face like stone. I nodded at the right moments. I didn't ask questions. I didn't argue. And the more cooperative I became, the more Desmond relaxed, like my obedience was medicine. When we stood to leave, Desmond adjusted his cufflinks gold, new, shining like he'd already spent what he thought he'd won. "I'll have my lawyer send the paperwork," he said to Monique. Not to me. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't say anything about Nia or Micah. He brushed past me and walked out first. For a moment, I watched the door swing closed behind him. The air he left behind felt lighter and dirtier at the same time. The moment Quentin and Desmond were gone, Monique turned to me. "Okay," she said, voice low. "Tell me what I'm missing." I looked down at my hands. They were steady. That surprised me, because I should have been trembling. But I wasn't trembling. I was counting how many signatures it would take to make him responsible for what he thought he was stealing, counting the distance between this office and the courthouse downtown. "Let's just say," I told Monique, "he doesn't know what he's really taking." Monique's eyes sharpened. "Sierra," I met her gaze. "I'm not giving him my life. I'm giving him a receipt." She didn't speak for a long beat. Then she exhaled. Slow, like she was deciding whether to step onto a ledge with me. "This is a decoy," she said at last. "Yes," I answered. "A silent divorce decoy." Monique's jaw tightened. "Whatever you're planning, it better be clean." "It's clean," I said. "It's just cold." She nodded once. "If we do this wrong, you could lose your business for real." I smiled, just barely. If we do it right, he'll lose more than the business. By the time I reached my car, the winter air hit my face like truth. My phone was already buzzing. Mama, my cousin Aisha, my uncle, Jasmine, and finally, Grandma Laverne. I answered Grandma. "Baby," her voice came through thick with worry and anger. "Tell me you didn't do what Jasmine just told me you did." "I did," I said. A sharp inhale. "Lord have mercy. Sierra Naomi Jackson, what are you thinking? Your granddaddy fed half of Anacostia when folks didn't have a dime, and you're about to hand it over to a man who treats you like a paycheck?" "Grandma," I said gently, "I need you to trust me." "Trust you? That man is trying to erase you." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm letting him hold the eraser." Silence. Then her voice dropped. "Patience is a weapon, baby. If you know where to point it." "I do." "Then don't miss," she said, fierce and soft all at once. I won't, I promised, but I need you to do something for me. What? Don't warn him, I said. Don't call him. Don't let anybody run their mouth at church. Let him believe what he wants to believe. Grandma exhaled. You asking a lot. I know, I said, but if you love me, you'll let me be quiet. Another pause. Then softer, baby, are you okay? That question was the one that could have cracked me. Not Desmond, not Quentin. Grandma asking if I was okay, like she could hear the weight behind my calm. I closed my eyes. I'm not broken, I said. Not anymore. I'm focused. When we hung up, I sat there with the phone in my lap and let the silence settle. The car smelled faintly like my son's apple snacks and the vanilla air freshener Nia insisted on. Proof that a life was still happening around me. I didn't cry. Not then. I gave myself exactly 10 seconds to feel the bruise of what Desmond had just tried to do. Then I started the engine. Because the hardest part of any plan isn't the courtroom or the paperwork. It's the acting. It's going home and making dinner for the man who just tried to take your legacy. It's helping your daughter with homework while your mind is counting transfers, dates, names. It's tucking your son into bed and promising him tomorrow will be good, while you're building a tomorrow that will require him to be brave. And I knew, as I merged onto the highway and watched the city slide past, that Desmond would go home tonight thinking he'd won. He would sleep like a man who believes consequences are for other people. But the thing about a paper trail is this: it doesn't care what you believe. A wire fraud paper trail is patient. It waits. It keeps receipts when people think they're deleting history. And Desmond, my husband, my almost ex, had been leaving receipts everywhere. He just didn't know I'd started collecting them. So listen. If you're still with me right now, don't go anywhere, because what happens next is the part that makes people sit up in their chairs and whisper, "No way." The kind of twist that doesn't come from magic, but from arrogance, from greed, from a man who wanted everything so badly he couldn't see the trap wrapped in the gift. And before we dive into how I said it, do me a favor, tap the like button if you're ready for this story to get real. Then drop a comment telling me what time it is where you're watching from and your city or country. Because the next time you hear Desmond Jackson say, "I want everything," you'll understand why I let him have it. I drove home from Monique's office with my hands steady on the wheel and my heart doing that quiet thing it does when it has already accepted the truth. The beltway crawled, taillights glowing red in the early winter haze. When I turned into our neighborhood in Bowie, the porch light was already on. Desmond liked the house to look welcoming from the street. Brick cleaned, shrubs trimmed, everything staged to say, "Nothing is wrong here." I sat in the driveway for a moment, engine humming, and listened. No music. No phone, just the faint tick of the turn signal I'd forgotten to shut off. In my lap, the folder Monique had handed me felt heavier than paper should. Inside, the smell of garlic and browned butter clung to the air. I had prepped dinner early because routines keep children from noticing fractures. Nia's backpack leaned against the stairs. Micah's little sneakers lay in a careless trail across the hallway. The TV murmured in the living room. "Hey!" Desmond called, not looking up. "Hey," I answered. 2 syllables each. Coworkers in the same building. I went to the kitchen, washed my hands, and stirred the pot. Desmond wandered in a few minutes later, phone in his hand, screen angled away from me by instinct. He kissed the top of my head, quick, dry, performative, and opened the fridge. "Smells good," he said. He didn't ask where I'd been. He didn't ask why my voice sounded flat. He didn't ask, because he didn't want answers. He wanted the illusion of a normal evening while he planned the dismantling of my life. And that's when it hit me. This didn't start today. Today was just the first time he said it out loud. So let me take you back. Not to the conference room, not to the paperwork, back to where the cracks first appeared, thin as hairline fractures in glass, easy to ignore until the whole thing shatters. I'm 40 years old. I've lived in the D.C. area my entire life. Raised on the Maryland side, where you learn early that success is something you build with your hands. My grandfather, Albert Jackson, came up from North Carolina in the late 80s with a skillet, a cooler, and a stubborn belief that food could keep a community stitched together. He parked a battered food truck near Anacostia, back when nobody was calling it a destination. Granddad fed people who worked double shifts and still came up short. Folks lined up in the rain for his catfish and greens. They called him Mr. Jackson with respect, even if they didn't have much else. Over the years, that truck turned into a brick-and-mortar spot, Jackson's Wharf Kitchen. Warm light, clean tables, and a steady line of regulars who'd become family. The restaurant was never just income, it was proof. My mother taught school by day and taught me the books at night. Numbers tell the truth, she used to say. People don't always. By 17, I could balance a register faster than most adults. By 25, I knew how to read a vendor invoice the way some people read faces. I took over daily operations when Granddad's health started slipping. It wasn't an announcement, it was a quiet handoff, me showing up earlier, staying later, taking the calls nobody else wanted to take. That's what made me vulnerable, I think. When you're building something bigger than yourself, you assume your partner will treat it as sacred. You don't imagine they're studying it like a prize. I met Desmond at a charity mixer downtown, one of those polished events where people clap for speeches and forget the cause by the time dessert comes out. He was handsome in that clean-cut way, tall, smooth voice, quick smile. He worked procurement for a federal contractor, a job title impressive enough to repeat at family gatherings and vague enough to hide behind. He didn't rush me. He texted good morning. He sent flowers to the kitchen. He showed up on Saturdays and sat at the counter where regulars could see him, laughing at their jokes, shaking hands like he belonged. My grandmother watched him with narrowed eyes, but even she admitted he had manners. When he proposed, it was at the waterfront at dusk. He said he admired my work ethic. He said he wanted a future, a home, stability. I said yes because I wanted partnership, and because being loved felt like relief. For a while, it was good, ordinary, in the best way. He helped paint the nursery. He cooked breakfast on Sundays. When Nia was born, he cried so hard the nurse handed him tissues, like he was the one in labor. When Micah arrived 4 years later, he held that baby against his chest and whispered promises I believed. Then life got heavy. I worked too much. Desmond traveled more. I ran the restaurant like a ship that couldn't take on water. He said he understood. He said he was proud. He'd bring coworkers to Jackson's Wharf Kitchen and introduce me as my wife, the brains behind the best kitchen in the city. He'd smile like my success made him shine. But pride has a shadow, and somewhere around year 9, the shadow started creeping across his face. He stopped coming to the restaurant unless he had company to impress. He stopped asking about my day unless he needed something. His phone became a third presence at the table, face down like a secret. If Nia talked about school, he nodded without looking up. If Micah showed him a drawing, Desmond said, "Nice," the way you say it to a stranger's child. Then the late nights started. At first, it was 1 or 2 a month. Quarterly close? He'd say. Vendor issues? Then it became weekly. He'd walk in after midnight, smelling like cold air and something sweeter, something that didn't belong to our house. When I asked questions, he made me feel guilty for having them. "You don't understand my world, Sierra," he'd say, sighing like I was the problem. This is real pressure. As if feeding a community, paying staff, keeping a legacy alive wasn't pressure. The first time he snapped at me for touching his phone, I apologized. I still hate that memory. I apologized for wanting transparency in my own marriage. "Why are you acting paranoid?" he asked, voice sharp. "I work hard. I come home. What else do you want?" What I wanted was my husband back. But you can't ask for what someone has already given away. Our 11th anniversary was the night I stopped pretending my instincts were imaginary. I made reservations in Georgetown, put on a navy dress that made me feel like myself again, and sat at a table by the window, watching other couples lean toward each other like they still chose each other every day. Desmond didn't show. He called late and said, irritated, "I forgot. Can we do it this weekend?" Forgot. Like the day we promised forever was an appointment he could reschedule. I cried in a parking garage until my throat hurt, then went home, washed my face, and told the kids Daddy was working. I became skilled at lying for him because the lie felt kinder than the truth. So by the time Desmond looked me in the eye today and demanded everything, I wasn't shocked that he wanted to leave. I was shocked he said it, without pretending to care. That night, after dinner, after homework, after baths and bedtime stories, Desmond went upstairs with his phone and closed the door like privacy was his right and honesty was my weakness. I cleaned the kitchen, wiped the counters, and sat at the dining room table with my laptop. Not to beg. Not to pray. Not to collapse. To look? At first, I only meant to check the household account, just to reassure myself. But my fingers moved like they knew where the truth lived. I opened the business portal, the one Desmond insisted on helping me streamline, and a list of recent charges rolled down the screen. A boutique hotel in Navy Yard, a jewelry store in Bethesda, 2 flights labeled consulting travel that didn't match any conference calendar. My stomach went cold. Not dramatic, just factual. This was more than distance. This was extraction. And my silent divorce decoy had just found its first thread in the dark. Because if my mother was right, numbers tell the truth, then the truth had been bleeding out of my business for a long time, and Desmond had been standing close enough to catch every drop. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was crying, not because I was spinning with questions I couldn't answer. I didn't sleep because the numbers on my screen had rearranged the world, and once the world rearranges itself inside you, your body refuses to pretend it's the same. Desmond was upstairs, door closed, the soft murmur of whatever he watched to help him forget he was a husband. Every now and then the floorboards creaked, and I could picture him shifting in bed, scrolling with that familiar thumb, the one that used to trace circles on my palm in church. The same thumb that now swiped secrets. Downstairs, I sat at the dining room table with my laptop and a cup of tea I never drank. The kitchen clock ticked loud enough to sound like footsteps. I kept hearing the same phrases in my head, sharp as glass. Navy Yard Hotel. Bethesda Jewelry. Flights that didn't match any conference. I clicked into the business portal again. Jackson's Wharf Kitchen. My grandfather's name in the header, the logo we'd kept simple because he believed quality didn't need decoration. I scrolled slowly, the way you scroll when you already know what you're going to find, and you're trying to control how hard it hits. Charges appeared in neat rows like they were innocent. 2-night stay at a boutique hotel, dinner at a steakhouse I'd never been to, a rideshare at 2:17 a.m. From Georgetown, a salon appointment on a Tuesday afternoon because Desmond didn't pay for women to feel ordinary. He paid for them to feel chosen. My stomach didn't flip. It sank. That was worse. I copied the charges into a separate file. Date, amount, merchant, category. I highlighted anything that wasn't obviously related to food service, staffing, utilities, or vendor purchases. A pattern emerged the way a picture emerges in the dark when you finally adjust your eyes. He was using my business like it was a pocket, and he'd been doing it long enough to feel comfortable. By 3:06 a.m., my tea was cold, my eyes were dry, and I had a list of transactions that looked like a life I didn't recognize. I closed my laptop and sat still for a moment, letting the quiet settle around me like a blanket soaked in ice. Upstairs, Desmond's phone vibrated. I heard it through the floor. The sound was faint but unmistakable, like a mosquito you can't see but know is in the room. That's the thing about betrayal. It has a sound, it has a smell, it has a rhythm. Once you learn it, you can't unlearn it. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. I moved through the house like everything was normal. Packed lunches, signed homework folders, found Micah's missing shoe, braided Naya's hair while she talked about a science project, her voice bright and trusting. "Mom," she said, watching me in the mirror, "are you and Dad mad at each other?" My hands didn't stop moving. I kept my fingers gentle, careful not to pull too tight, careful not to show the tremor I felt under my skin. "We're not mad," I said. "We're just busy." She studied my face. Eyes too old for 10. Children learn early that adults lie with smiles. "Okay," she said softly, like she didn't believe me, but loved me enough to accept the answer. Desmond came down 10 minutes later, showered and dressed like a man with no secrets. He kissed Micah on the head, told Nia to be good, and glanced at me like I was furniture he'd already mentally moved out of the room. "Big day," he said. "For you?" I asked, voice smooth. "For both of us?" he replied, and I could hear the smugness tucked inside it, like he'd already filed the paperwork in his head. Like he'd already divided my life into boxes and labeled the ones he planned to keep. I smiled. Not warm, not cold, neutral. A face that gave nothing away. After I dropped the kids at school, I drove straight to the restaurant. Jackson's Wharf Kitchen sat where it always had, a few blocks off Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. Not flashy, not trying to be trendy, just steady. The morning sun hit the front windows and lit up the open sign like a promise. Inside, the air smelled like onions caramelizing and coffee brewing, and for a second I felt anchored. Real. Like the building itself was telling me, "You've survived worse than a man's ego." Kendra, my lead cook, waved from the line. "Morning, Miss Sierra." "Morning," I called back, letting my voice carry its usual rhythm. I walked to my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop again. This time, I pulled up the last 18 months of statements. Not just the credit card, the accounts, the transfers, the vendor payments. I started with what I knew. When Desmond insisted on being helpful, he'd asked to be added as an authorized signatory. He'd framed it like partnership. "We're building together," he'd said. "You shouldn't carry it all." And because I was tired, because I wanted him to feel included, because I believed marriage meant shared responsibility, I'd signed the form. I stared at that memory like it was a bruise. By noon, I'd found 3 payments to a vendor I didn't recognize. Cedar Ridge Consulting. The name sounded legitimate. It had that bland corporate smell men like Desmond love. But I didn't remember hiring them. I pulled up the invoices in our digital folder. Clean design, professional logo, services described in vague phrases. Operational optimization, vendor relationship management, strategic cost reduction. Words that could mean anything. Words that could hide everything. I leaned back and breathed through my nose, slow and steady, and did what my mother trained me to do. I followed the numbers. The invoices were always just under a threshold that would trigger a secondary approval. Not big enough to set off an alarm, not small enough to look like a mistake. Perfectly measured theft. When I checked the bank transfer details, my stomach tightened again. The routing numbers didn't match any of our usual business partners. The funds were being moved out, then moved again, like someone wanted the trail to blur before it could be caught. A wire fraud paper trail doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It leaves fingerprints in the places most people don't look. I looked. I printed everything. Highlighted, labeled. Stacked the pages like evidence, not because I planned to play detective, but because I knew I needed to walk into Monique's office with more than feelings. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed. Jasmine, my best friend since community college, was calling. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want her, because I didn't trust my voice. Instead, I let it go to voicemail and texted, "Can you talk later tonight? Need you." She replied immediately, "I'm coming to you. Don't argue." That was Jasmine. She didn't ask permission to be loyal. By 5 p.m., the lunch rush had faded, and the kitchen settled into its afternoon rhythm. I finished payroll, smiled at the staff, took a call from a vendor, and nodded through a conversation about catering for a church anniversary. I acted like a woman with a business. Because I was. But beneath every normal moment, my mind kept returning to that row of charges from the hotel, the jewelry store, the flights. A second life financed by the first? At 7:12, Jasmine walked into the restaurant like a storm wrapped in a coat. She crossed the dining room, eyes scanning faces, then pushed open my office door without knocking. She closed it behind her and stared at me. "You look too calm," she said. "I'm tired," I replied. "No," she said, stepping closer. "You look quiet. Quiet." Like she'd tasted the word and knew it didn't belong. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Sit." Jasmine sat, but she didn't relax. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, hands clasped like she was holding something back. "Talk," she said. So I did. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. I told her about the mediation. About Desmond's demand. About Monique's shock when I said yes. Jasmine's mouth fell open. "Sierra." "Don't," I warned softly. She swallowed hard. "Okay, fine. Then tell me what you're doing." I slid the stack of highlighted statements across the desk. Jasmine picked them up, eyes moving fast. She'd been in real estate long enough to read contracts and recognize when something smelled off. As she flipped through the pages, her face changed. Anger first, then something sharper. This isn't just cheating," she said. "No," I replied. "It's theft." Jasmine set the papers down carefully like they might cut her. "How long?" "I don't know yet," I said, "but long enough that he thinks he can demand everything." Jasmine's lips pressed tight. "Where's he taking it? Who's he with?" I don't have a name, I admitted. Not yet. She stared at me, then reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. I might, she said. My stomach tightened. Jasmine? Don't you Jasmine me, she snapped. I saw something last week I didn't want to bring to you because I knew it would break your heart. But I'm done protecting him. My hand stayed still on the desk. What did you see? She exhaled. Georgetown. Sunday afternoon, I was showing a condo to a client near the waterfront, and I saw Desmond. Not alone, with a woman. The office seemed to shrink around that sentence. I kept my voice low. Are you sure? Jasmine's eyes flashed. Sierra, I'm not guessing. They were together, close. She had her hand on his arm like she owned it. He was laughing, real laughing. And when I looked directly at him, he turned his head like he didn't know me. Like he didn't know the woman who held your babies while you went back to work. A coldness spread through my chest. Not dramatic, just steady. What did she look like? I asked. Younger, Jasmine said. Late 20s maybe. Light brown skin, long hair, designer bag, red nails, pretty in that polished way. And she had that expression, like she thought she'd won something. I pictured her in my mind, glossy, curated, confident. The kind of woman who doesn't see herself as a side character. The kind of woman who believes she's the story. Jasmine leaned in. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't want to be the one to tell you. I needed to know, I said. My voice sounded distant to me. Jasmine reached across the desk and covered my hand with hers. Warm, human. Sierra, she said, what's your next move? I looked down at our hands, then up at her. My next move, I said carefully, is to stop guessing. That night, after the restaurant closed and the staff went home, I drove back to Bowie with Jasmine following in her car like a guard dog. She insisted on coming inside. She insisted on seeing my face in my own kitchen, not in my office where I knew how to perform. Desmond wasn't home when we arrived. His absence was a relief and a confirmation. We sat at my kitchen island with the lights dimmed low, the house quiet except for the distant hum of the fridge. Jasmine stirred her tea. You're going to hire someone, she said. I already have a lawyer, I replied. A lawyer is for paperwork, she said. You need proof. I know, I whispered. I went upstairs and pulled a business card from the drawer where I kept receipts and spare keys. I'd picked it up months ago at a networking event and never thought I'd use it. Reggie Sloan. Investigations. Jasmine read it and nodded. Call him. I waited until the next morning. Because there are moments in your life when you know the second you cross a line, you won't ever be the person you were before. Hiring a private investigator isn't a dramatic movie decision. It's a quiet admission that your marriage has turned into a crime scene. At 9:03 a.m., I called. Reggie Sloan answered on the second ring. His voice was deep, steady, and tired in the way men get when they've seen too much lying. Sloan Investigations. My name is Sierra Jackson, I said. I need evidence. There was a pause. Not surprise, just space. Come in, he said. Today. Bring what you have. And don't tell anyone you're coming. His office was in a low brick building in Hyattsville, the kind of place you'd drive past without noticing. No sign that screamed investigations, no bright lights. Just a door and a hallway, and a waiting room with gray chairs and a water cooler. Reggie met me himself. He was in his late 50s, broad shoulders, salt and pepper hair cut close, eyes sharp behind simple glasses. He wore a navy sweater, no flashy suit, no need to impress. He shook my hand and looked me straight in the face. Most people come in here already knowing, he said. They're just hoping the truth will hurt less when it has pictures. I sat across from him and placed my folder on his desk. I don't want it to hurt less, I said. I want it to be usable. That earned me a small nod. Respect. Reggie opened the folder and flipped through the pages. He didn't gasp. He didn't react. He read like a man reading weather patterns. When he finished, he leaned back. This isn't just infidelity, he said. This is financial exposure. I know, I replied. How do we prove it? We prove it by documenting his behavior, Reggie said. Where he goes, who he meets, what he spends. We follow the money and the man. But I need to ask you something first. What? Can you keep acting normal? He asked. Because the moment he suspects you're watching, he'll change the pattern. And patterns are how we catch people. I thought about Desmond kissing my head, his phone angled away, his calm voice saying he wanted everything. "I've been acting normal for 2 years," I said. "I can do it longer." Reggie nodded, then slid a contract across the desk. It was simple. Confidentiality. Rates. Methods. No promises, just work. I signed. Wrote the retainer check from my personal account, the one Desmond didn't monitor, because he never imagined I'd have anything that wasn't connected to him. As I stood to leave, Reggie stopped me with one last sentence. "Mrs. Jackson," he said, "prepare yourself." The truth is usually worse than the suspicion. I drove to the restaurant afterward and worked a full day like nothing had changed. I smiled at customers. I refilled sweet tea. I laughed with a woman who'd been coming since my grandfather's day. I hugged an elderly man who told me the fish reminded him of his mother. Every normal interaction felt like I was borrowing someone else's skin. That evening, Desmond came home around 9:30, later than usual. He tossed his keys in the bowl, loosened his tie, and headed for the fridge. "Long day," he said. "Same," I replied. He looked at me for a moment longer than necessary, like he was checking to see if I'd cracked. I didn't. He nodded to himself and went upstairs. The door to our bedroom closed. I listened to the click of the latch. Then I opened my laptop and began building my own file. A quiet one. A deliberate one. A file I would eventually hand to Monique, not as a complaint, but as a weapon. In the days that followed, Reggie sent brief texts. He left 7:12. He's at Navy Yard. He met female, approx 5'6", hair long, driving white Lexus. Hotel entry captured. Each message hit me like a cold drop of water. Not enough to drown, enough to keep me awake. I never replied with emotion, just received. Thank you. Keep going. Because this wasn't about love anymore. It was about what Desmond had turned love into. On day 5, Reggie called while I was in my office at the restaurant. His voice was low. "I have a name," he said. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Tell me." "Kayla Renee Vaughn," he replied. 29, works in corporate relations for a medical supply company. Lives in Bethesda. No marriage record, no kids. She's been seeing your husband for at least 18 months. 18 months. I stared at the wall, eyes unfocused. In 18 months, my son had lost his first tooth. My daughter had learned long division. In 18 months, I'd planned family vacations Desmond had work conflicts for. In 18 months, he'd come home to my bed and left his lies on my pillow. "Does she know?" I asked. Reggie paused. "Based on what I've seen, she thinks he's separated. Maybe divorced. She doesn't act like a woman sneaking. She acts like a woman being promised." A bitter laugh tried to rise in my throat. I swallowed it down. "What about the money?" I asked. "That's where it gets ugly," Reggie said. "I'm still pulling records, but you were right to be concerned. There are payments from your business accounts to entities linked to him. I'm compiling it." "Keep compiling," I said. "Mrs. Jackson," he added, "don't confront him." "I won't," I replied. "Not yet." That night, Desmond walked in smelling like a woman's perfume layered under his cologne. He kissed Nia goodnight. He asked Micah if he'd been good for mommy. He told me, "Busy week. Might travel this weekend." I smiled like I believed him. Inside, something in me crystallized. Not rage, not heartbreak. Resolve. On day 9, Reggie delivered the first packet. He didn't email it. He didn't leave it in a mailbox. He asked me to meet him in person. We sat in his office again, and he slid a manila folder across the desk. "Open it," he said. Inside were photographs, clear and cruel. Desmond entering a hotel lobby in Navy Yard, looking over his shoulder like a man who thinks caution makes him innocent. Desmond and Kayla at a restaurant in Georgetown, leaning close, her hand on his thigh beneath the table, his smile real in a way I hadn't seen in years. Desmond and Kayla in a parking garage, kissing like teenagers, his hands in her hair, her body pressed to his like she belonged there. Each photograph felt like a door closing. Reggie watched me without pity. "There's more," he said, flipping to another section. Printed screenshots of messages. A calendar invite. A hotel receipt paid with a card tied to the business. Then came the bank statements. Reggie spread them out, tracing lines with a pen. "Cedar Ridge Consulting," he said, tapping the name. "It's a shell." "How do you know?" I asked. Because it's registered to a P.O. box, he replied. And the registered agent is an LLC that links back to your husband's email. He set it up. I felt my pulse in my throat. How much? In the last 6 months alone, Reggie said, 192,000. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the desk. Reggie kept going, voice steady. It started small, a few grand at a time, then grew. He's also running personal charges through your corporate card. Hotel stays, jewelry, flights, dinner. If the IRS audits those accounts, you could be questioned. Questioned, I repeated, voice quiet. Or implicated, he said. Not because you did it, but because the accounts are yours. My mouth went dry. I thought of my children, their school, their friends, their sense of normal. Desmond hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been positioning me as collateral damage. Reggie leaned forward. Here's the good news, he said. You have timestamps. You have your work schedule. You have witnesses. Your lifestyle doesn't match the spending. You can show you didn't benefit. And the bad news? I asked. The bad news is, he said, he's bold enough to demand everything because he believes you're too kind to expose him. He believes you'll protect his image. I sat back slowly. Reggie was right. Desmond relied on my silence. He'd been building his life on the assumption that I would rather suffer than embarrass him. That assumption was his weakness. I left Reggie's office with copies of everything and drove to the waterfront, not because I wanted to cry by water like a cliché, but because I needed space between my body and my house. The river was gray and cold. People walked their dogs. Couples held hands like love was simple. I sat on a bench and watched the water move, steady and indifferent. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I prayed, not for my marriage, for clarity. And when I stood up, I had it. The next morning, I met Monique Harlan in her office downtown. She greeted me with the same sharp composure as before, but when I placed Reggie's folder on her desk, her eyes narrowed. You're early, she said. I'm ready, I answered. Monique opened the folder and began reading. Her face didn't change much. She was trained for horror, but her eyes hardened with each page. When she finished, she looked up slowly. You have enough to destroy him? She said. We can go to court and make sure he leaves with nothing. I held her gaze. I don't want that, I said. Monique blinked once. Excuse me? I want to give him everything he's asking for, I said calmly. Monique leaned back, disbelief and caution fighting on her face. Sierra, that's insanity. No, I said. It's strategy. She stared at me like she was trying to decide whether I was in shock. I wasn't. I explained it slowly, not like a how-to, but like a truth. He's been stealing through the business, I said. He's been using the corporate card. He's created shell vendors and moved money. If the business transfers fully into his name cleanly, legally, then he becomes the responsible party for what's tied to it. Monique's eyes narrowed further. You're talking about timing. Yes, I said. And documentation. Monique tapped her pen against the folder. This is a legacy restaurant sting, she murmured, almost to herself. A decoy that turns into a net. I nodded. Silent divorce decoy, I said. He thinks I'm surrendering. I'm letting him step into the paper trail he made. Monique's jaw tightened. This is risky. I know, I replied. If we do this wrong, she said, you could lose everything for real. If we do this right, I said, voice steady, he loses the illusion that he can burn my life down and walk away clean. Monique held my gaze for a long beat. Then she exhaled and nodded once. All right, she said. If we're doing this, we do it clean, we do it careful, and we do it fast. She reached for her calendar. We'll draft terms. We'll structure the transfer. We'll keep you protected from liability as much as possible. And we'll coordinate with the appropriate agencies if necessary. Necessary, I echoed. Monique looked at me. Sierra, once you involve federal interest, there's no undo button. I'm not looking for undo, I said. I'm looking for forward. She watched me for a moment, then softened, just slightly. How are you holding up? I thought about Nia's question in the mirror, about Micah's laugh when I tickled him the night before, about Desmond's perfume-drenched cologne. I'm holding, I said. That's enough. Monique nodded. Good, she said, because the next part is going to test your nerves. How? I asked. You're going to keep acting normal, she said. You're going to let him believe he's winning. And you're going to sign documents that will make your family think you've lost your mind. Thanks for watching. I smiled faintly. They already do, I said. Monique didn't smile back. Sierra? She said, voice low. Do you understand what kind of man you're dealing with? Yes, I answered. A man who thinks love is leverage. And do you understand what kind of woman you have to beat him? She asked. I met her eyes. Quiet, I said. Patient. Unmoved. Monique nodded again. Exactly. On day 12, the house gave me one of those moments that feels like a warning wrapped in ordinary sound. It was past midnight. I dozed off on the couch, my laptop closed, the TV muted. I woke to a whisper reel coming from the kitchen. I didn't move. I just listened. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. Then Desmond's voice slid through the dark. Yeah, he murmured. No, she doesn't know. She's tired. She's not paying attention. A pause. A low chuckle. I told you. She'll sign. She always signs. My fingers tightened around the blanket. Cold spread through my chest. His tone softened, intimate. Baby, I'm gonna have it, he said. House, cars, the business. Once it's in my name, we can move like we planned. You won't have to hide. Hide. That word hit heavy, like he'd been carrying it around for months. I heard a cabinet open. Ice drop into a glass. He was making a drink in the middle of the night, talking about taking my life like it was a weekend project. Then he said, and if she gets loud, we'll handle it. Quentin says there are ways to keep her quiet. He didn't explain what ways. He didn't need to. The implication was enough. The casualness was worse. I stayed still, not because I was afraid he'd hit me, but because I understood a new kind of danger. When a man is willing to steal, he's willing to rewrite. He's willing to paint you as unstable, emotional, irrational, anything that makes the world stop listening. His footsteps moved toward the hallway. I let my breathing stay slow, the way I'd learned to do when Micah woke crying, and I needed to soothe him while half asleep. Desmond paused near the couch. I felt him looking at me, measuring. Then his phone vibrated, and he walked away. When the bedroom door clicked shut upstairs, I opened my eyes and stared into the dark. I didn't cry. I reached for my laptop, opened my file, and typed one new line in bold. He thinks my silence is permission. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived 2 lives. In one life, I was the wife Desmond expected, soft-spoken, tired, overwhelmed, ready to let him take control. I packed lunches. I asked him about his day. I nodded when he complained about work. I let him talk about his future as if my presence was optional. In the other life, I met with Monique in the mornings and Reggie in the afternoons. I gathered statements. I signed authorizations. I pulled transaction histories. I made copies and stored them in a safe deposit box Desmond didn't know existed. I watched Desmond with new eyes. The way he carried himself when he thought he was being admired. The way he practiced concern in front of the children. The way his face changed when he thought I wasn't looking. One night, he came home with a small gift bag and handed it to me like a peace offering. Just because, he said. Inside was a bracelet. Not expensive enough to impress someone like Kayla, but shiny enough to make him feel generous. Thank you, I said. He watched me put it on. He wanted to see gratitude. He wanted to see me tethered. I smiled and kissed his cheek, and his skin felt like a stranger's. After he went upstairs, I took the bracelet off and placed it in a drawer with receipts. Everything became a receipt, even his affection. Then the divorce papers appeared on the kitchen counter one afternoon, like a threat delivered without a voice. No conversation, no apology, just a sticky note in his handwriting. My lawyer will be in touch. I read it and felt nothing, because I'd already written the ending in my mind. Monique called an hour later. He filed. She said, "You ready?" "I've been ready," I replied. "Then we proceed," she said. "We'll respond with agreement, full surrender. On paper." "On paper," I echoed. "And Sierra," she added, "don't underestimate him. He may be arrogant, but he's not stupid." "He's not stupid," I agreed. "He's just hungry." Monique exhaled. "Hunger makes people reckless," she said. "That's what we're counting on." The first negotiation meeting with Quentin Price happened a week later. Desmond wore a new suit, the kind men buy when they're trying to look like success. Quentin smiled too much. Desmond spoke too little. He wanted his lawyer to do the dirty work while he watched my face for cracks. Monique slid our response across the table. "We accept," she said. Quentin blinked. "All terms?" he asked, suspicious. "All terms," Monique replied. Desmond's eyes narrowed. He leaned back, studying me like he was trying to find the trick. I kept my face blank. Quentin's suspicion melted into satisfaction. "Excellent," he said. "Then we can draft the final settlement for the hearing." Desmond finally smiled, small and smug. He thought he'd won. He didn't see the wire fraud paper trail waiting behind the curtain. And as we stood to leave, Desmond leaned close enough for only me to hear. "You should have listened to me a long time ago," he whispered. "Life is easier when you don't fight." I looked him in the eye and let my voice stay soft. "I'm not fighting." I said, "I'm agreeing." His smile widened, relieved. He walked out of the room, believing my quiet meant weakness. But the truth was, my quiet was a door closing. And on the other side of that door, the consequences were already walking toward him, steady as footsteps in a hallway you can't escape. The morning of the final hearing came in under a flat, winter gray sky, the kind that makes Washington, D.C. look like it's holding its breath. I woke up before the alarm, before the house found its rhythm, and I moved quietly, coffee, shower, a simple face, hair pulled back. Nothing that could be called dramatic. I wasn't giving anyone a reason to label me unstable. Today wasn't for emotion, today was for timing. Nia was awake when I stepped into her room. 10 years old, eyes too observant, staring at the ceiling like she'd been counting cracks. "Mom," she whispered. "I'm here," I said, sitting beside her. "Is today the day?" she asked. Kids feel truth in the walls. I didn't pretend. "Yes," I told her. "Today." She swallowed. "Are you scared?" I thought about the courtroom, the signatures, the way Desmond would try to wear confidence like armor. "I'm not scared," I said. "I'm ready." In the kitchen, Micah asked for juice, and life kept going the way it always does, cruel in its normalcy. I packed lunches, found a missing shoe, smoothed Nia's coat collar, and kissed both of them goodbye like the world wasn't changing. Desmond came downstairs in a new navy suit, crisp and expensive. He smelled like cologne and certainty. He kissed the kids like a man campaigning for a good image, then glanced at me as if I were an item he'd already set aside. "You don't have to come," he said, voice easy. "I know," I replied. "I'm coming anyway." His jaw tightened. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I held his gaze. "I'm not making anything harder." He didn't know the difference between calm and surrender. He'd spent years confusing my quiet with agreement. "Not today." Monique told me to arrive early. "Rushing is how people make permanent mistakes," she'd said. So I met my family outside the federal courthouse downtown, the marble building that always felt colder than the weather. Metal detectors, echoing halls, guards who looked through you like you were paperwork. Mama sat in the back row with her hands clasped tight. Jasmine was beside her, eyes sharp, jaw set. Grandma Laverne wore her church hat like armor and her expression like warning. When she saw me, she pulled me into a hug that smelled faintly of lavender and strength. "You better know what you're doing," she murmured. "I do," I whispered. She pulled back and searched my eyes. "Then don't you flinch." "I won't," I said. Desmond walked in 10 minutes later like he owned the air. Quentin Price followed him, smooth smile ready. And Kayla Vaughn glided in behind them, coat perfectly tailored, hair glossy, lipstick confident. She took a seat 3 rows back like a trophy placed where everyone could see it but no one could touch it. Monique sat beside me, spine straight, pen ready. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Her calm was a wall. The judge entered, and we stood. The case began with the usual formalities, names and numbers, a life reduced to documents. Quentin rose and presented the settlement like a finished story. "The parties have reached an agreement. Mr. Jackson will retain the marital residence, both vehicles, and full ownership of Jackson's Wharf Kitchen. Mrs. Jackson accepts the remaining obligations as outlined." He said it smoothly, like fairness lived in his mouth. The judge looked at me. "Mrs. Jackson, do you understand the terms?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you're agreeing voluntarily?" "Yes, Your Honor." Behind me, Mama made a small sound. I didn't turn. If I saw their fear, I might feel it. I couldn't afford feeling right now. Monique slid the first document toward me. My hand didn't shake. I signed neatly, deliberately, the same way I sign vendor contracts. With each page, Desmond's shoulders loosened. His mouth lifted into that satisfied, private smile men get when they think they've taken something clean. Kayla watched too, eyes bright, like she was already imagining new paint colors in my kitchen. We reached the final page. The judge prepared to confirm the transfer. And then the courtroom door opened. Not a slam, not drama, just a steady push, like someone who wasn't asking permission. Two agents walked in wearing dark suits, credentials clipped to their belts. They moved with the calm certainty of authority that doesn't need applause. Quentin turned, irritation rising, until he saw the badges. His irritation drained into confusion. The black woman agent approached and handed him a folder. "Mr. Price," she said, voice clear. "We need a word." Quentin opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. The color left his face as if someone pulled a plug. He leaned toward Desmond so fast his chair scraped the floor and whispered something I couldn't hear. But I saw it in Desmond's body. The stiffening spine, the sudden grip on the table, the way his breathing changed. He looked at me, then really looked like he'd just realized the room had been rearranged without his consent. The agent turned toward the bench. "Your Honor, Special Agent Talia Brooks, FBI. This is Special Agent Marcus Lynn. We have an arrest warrant and supporting affidavit for Mr. Desmond Jackson." A hush fell, heavy and instant. Desmond stood too fast, his chair tipping back. "This is a mistake," he said, and for the first time in months, his voice carried a crack. "This has nothing to do with me." Agent Brooks didn't blink. "Mr. Desmond Jackson, you are under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and theft by deception." The words were procedural, but they landed like a verdict. Desmond's face turned ashen. His eyes darted to Quentin, to the judge, to the agents, like he was trying to find a door that didn't exist. Then, his gaze snapped to me, and something raw broke loose. "You," he choked out. He lunged. The bailiff caught him before he made it 3 steps, hands firm on his arm. Desmond fought like a man trying to wrestle his pride back into place. "You set me up," he shouted. "You knew. You planned this." Kayla stood in the back row, confusion collapsing into panic. "Desmond, what is this?" she cried. He didn't look at her. In that moment, she wasn't a prize. She was proof. The judge banged her gavel. "Order!" Desmond couldn't hear her. He was staring at me like I'd become something he didn't recognize. "You gave it to me," he spat, voice wild. "Because you knew it was poisoned." I rose slowly. Monique's hand brushed my sleeve, a silent check-in. I was sure. I stepped forward just enough to be heard, not enough to be touched. "I didn't poison anything," I said, calm as glass. "You did." His mouth opened, furious and desperate. I kept my voice steady, because steady is what terrifies a man expecting tears. "You wanted everything," I said. "So I gave you everything. The house, the cars, the business, and the responsibility that comes with your name on it." Desmond shook his head hard, as if shaking could undo paper. "Sierra, you can't think about the kids." "Think about the kids?" I repeated softly. "You didn't." That sentence landed. Not like revenge. Like truth. The agents cuffed him with practiced efficiency. Metal clicked. Final. A sound that didn't care about history or vows. Kayla sank back into her seat, hands over her mouth, lipstick trembling like it had lost its purpose. The woman who'd walked in glowing now looked like a person waking up in a burning room. Desmond kept his eyes on me as they led him away, rage and disbelief dragging behind him like a shadow. "You're cold," he spit out. I didn't answer. Cold is what they call a woman when she stops bleeding for them. The judge looked to Monique. "Counsel, do you have documentation supporting federal involvement?" Monique stood. "Yes, Your Honor. All records and affidavits have been submitted." The judge nodded once, as if steadying the room. "This court is adjourned." The gavel struck. Sharp, clean. Outside, the winter sun hit like a spotlight. My family poured around me, voices tumbling questions, gasps, relief. Monique guided me a few steps away from the crowd, just under the courthouse overhang where the wind couldn't steal our words. Her expression stayed professional, but her eyes held a quiet satisfaction. "The affidavit stuck," she said. "The timing was perfect." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now it stops being about divorce and starts being about prosecution," she replied. "Ownership matters." He insisted on it. The law heard him. Mama's voice trembled behind us. "Sierra, baby, explain." I turned carefully. "He moved money through the restaurant," I said. "Used business accounts for personal spending. Fake vendors. Transfers, the agents have been tracking it." Mama's eyes widened, horror and relief wrestling in her face. "And you let him take it?" "I let him claim it," I corrected, because he wanted my legacy without the truth attached. He didn't know the truth was stapled to the paperwork. Jasmine let out a shaky breath. "That's the coldest thing I've ever heard." "It's not cold," Grandma Laverne said, stepping close. "It's clean. It's survival." She looked at me, and the anger in her eyes softened into pride. "Patience is a weapon," she murmured, "but only in the right hands." Monique glanced toward the street where traffic flowed like nothing had happened. "Don't celebrate too loudly," she warned. "This isn't the ending. It's the hinge. A hinge. One life closing, another opening quiet, irreversible." I breathed in the air and tasted metal, like handcuffs had a flavor. Somewhere inside me, fear finally blinked and then obeyed for the first time. Mama grabbed my hands. "Sierra, what happened?" Jasmine looked like she wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. "Girl," she breathed, "I knew you weren't broken." Grandma Laverne didn't ask for details. She stepped in front of me and cupped my face in her hands. "Your granddaddy would have smiled so hard his cheeks would have hurt," she said, voice shaking with pride. A warmth finally rose in my chest, small, real. "I'm not done," I told her. She nodded like she'd known that all along. "I know," she said, "but now everybody else knows what kind of woman you are." And standing there in the bright cold, with Desmond's screams still echoing in my ears, I understood what had been true the whole time. Everything had a reason. Every late night. Every secret charge. Every cruel word. Every quiet signature. All of it led here. The moment a man who thought love was leverage learned that paper remembers. And a woman who stays quiet doesn't always lose. Sometimes she's just letting the trap close. I walked out of that courthouse into air that tasted like winter and consequence. Cars hissed over damp pavement. A bus sighed at the curb. People moved past the steps like nothing in the world had just cracked open. Life doesn't pause for your heartbreak or your justice. It keeps going, and you either go with it or get dragged. My family gathered close. Mama held my hands like she needed proof I was real. Jasmine stood at my side, sharp-eyed and ready. Grandma Laverne stayed behind my shoulder, quiet and solid, the way old strength always is. Monique leaned in. "From now on, you don't speak to Desmond without counsel present. No calls, no texts, no closure conversations. You let the process work." "I understand," I said. "Understanding is clean. Feeling is messy." Still, I kept my breathing even and eyes clear. When I got home, the house looked exactly the same. Same wreath on the door, same photos in the hallway, me, Desmond, Nia, Micah smiling like we didn't know what was coming. I stood there with my coat still on, listening to the silence. It wasn't peaceful, it was empty. Then Micah ran into me, arms around my legs. "Mommy!" Nia followed slower, eyes searching my face like she was reading a page I hadn't handed her. "Is Daddy coming home?" she asked. I crouched, so we were eye level. "Not tonight," I said. "Not for a while." Her throat moved. "Did he do something bad?" "He made choices that hurt people," I said carefully, "and now he has to deal with consequences." Micah tugged my sleeve. "Can we have pizza?" We had pizza. We watched a movie. I laughed at the right moments. I tucked them in and kissed their foreheads like the world wasn't changing. After they fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen island with one lamp on. I opened my notebook, the one filled with dates, charges, and the quiet map of Desmond's lies, and I wrote a sentence at the top of a clean page. "Rebuild after betrayal." Not as a quote, as an instruction. The next 6 months weren't cinematic. They were paperwork and patience and the kind of tired that sits in your bones. There were meetings with prosecutors, depositions with careful questions, audits that made my stomach tighten even when I knew the answers. Monique moved through it all like a surgeon, keeping my name separated from his crimes and my life separated from his story. Desmond tried to reach me twice. The first time, he called from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. His voice was thin and furious. "Sierra, you need to fix this. They don't understand. This is being blown up." Being blown up, like he hadn't lit the match. The second time, he pushed a message through Quentin, an apology wrapped in demands. Monique read it, snorted once, and filed it. "He's not sorry," she said. "He's scared." Federal agents froze accounts, pulled records, traced the shell vendors he'd built like little masks. The restaurant accounts took a hit, not because customers stopped coming, but because I had to pause and clean every corner he'd touched. Some vendors got nervous. A few asked if we were still stable. I looked them in the eye. "We're stable," I told them, "and we're getting stronger." Inside Jackson's Wharf kitchen, my staff watched me like they were waiting to see if I would collapse. I didn't. One morning before opening, I gathered everyone. The dining room smelled like coffee and onions and uncertainty. Desmond used this business like a personal bank, I told them. He hid it, and I didn't catch it fast enough. That ends now. 2 signatures on transfers, weekly reconciliation, monthly outside review, no exceptions. Malik, my prep cook, asked, "Miss Sierra, we gonna be okay?" "Yes," I said, "and we're going to be safer than we've ever been." Because rebuilding isn't just replacing what was stolen, it's redesigning so it can't happen again. I set up profit sharing for longtime staff. I brought in a financial advisor to teach basic money protection, credit, budgeting, fraud alerts because I refused to let my people be vulnerable the way I'd been. We tightened systems, and the kitchen breathed again. The community noticed. They didn't come to gossip. They came to support. Regulars tipped heavy, squeezed my hand, and said, "Proud of you?" On Sundays, the line outside looked like a quiet vote of confidence. At home, I did the harder work. Desmond's absence showed up in small places. An empty hook by the door where his keys used to hang. A missing mug in the cabinet. A school form that asked for father's phone number, and my pen hovering before I drew one clean line through the space. The court arranged supervised video calls, short and structured. Nia sat stiff through them, polite but distant. Micah asked one question, "When are you coming back?" Then went right back to his toys. After each call, Dr. Cole helped them name what they felt without blaming themselves. And I learned to let the house be different without treating different like disaster. We made new rituals. Friday movie night, Saturday pancakes, Sunday after church walks. Stability. Rebuilt one ordinary hour at a time. No one begged. We just kept showing up. I found a therapist for Nia and Micah, a calm black woman named Dr. Amina Cole, who spoke to them like they were strong enough to hold the truth. One quiet evening, while I folded laundry at the foot of my bed, Nia asked, "Mom, do you hate him?" I stopped with a towel in my hands. I chose my words like ingredients. "No," I said, "I don't hate him." She frowned. "Why not?" "Hate takes up too much room." I told her, "If I fill myself with it, there's less space for you and Micah and the good we're building. I can be angry. I can protect us. But I won't live in hate." Nia stared at the carpet, thinking, "Is it okay if I'm angry?" "It's okay," I said. "Anger tells you something was wrong. Just don't let it become your whole story." Micah shouted from the hallway, "Mommy, where's my cape?" And the moment broke like a wave pulling back from shore. When the plea deal came through, Monique called during a lunch rush. I stepped outside behind the restaurant where the air smelled like rain and exhaust. "He took it," she said. "Federal time, restitution, no claim to your assets." I leaned my head back against the brick and closed my eyes. I expected fireworks. I felt quiet. Relief isn't loud. Sometimes it's just your shoulders dropping for the first time in months. That evening, Grandma Laverne came by with a casserole like she always did when life was changing. She sat at my table, looked around my kitchen, and said, "He thought he was taking your future." "He was trying," I replied. Grandma nodded. "But he didn't know you were raised by people who survive." I looked at her hands, steady from decades of work and prayer. "You were right," I admitted. "Patience is a weapon." She smiled, small and proud. "Only when you aim it at the truth." In the months after, I learned something I wish someone had told me when I thought love could protect me from everything. Love is not a shield. Clarity is. Boundaries are. Documentation is. And the quiet decision to stop bleeding for someone who keeps asking for more? Desmond wanted everything. He demanded it like my life was his by right. I gave him what he asked for, not because I was weak, but because greed doesn't read fine print. Greed just signs. He thought I handed him my legacy. What I handed him was the weight of his own choices. And I walked away with what he could never steal: my name, my peace, and the kind of strength that doesn't need an audience. If you're listening and you're in the middle of your own storm, hear me. You're not powerless because you're quiet. Sometimes the smartest move looks like surrender to anyone who doesn't know the plan. If this story hit you somewhere deep, subscribe so you don't miss the next video we drop in the coming days. Tap like so this channel can keep bringing you stories with teeth and truth. And leave a comment, tell me what you would have done in my place, what time it is, where you're watching, and your city or country. Then click a video on the end screen, because there's always another lesson waiting.